Hello and welcome to the OhSewGecko channel. Today's tutorial we are doing the Tuesday Tote by Knotted Threads. This tutorial is part of the sewing marathon brought to you by the Marathon Sewciety, so make sure you check out all the other videos in this series. So let's have a look at this bag. This is the Tuesday Tote from Knotted Threads. I've chosen to do option B, and I've also added some extra features from the weekend add-on pack. The first thing you'll notice is I've added a pocket to the front and also to the back. Now this is part of the weekend add-on pack, however I have deviated from the pattern a little in doing this pocket, but I'll show you how to do that. Inside, we've got lots going on. So the first thing is we have a keyring clip, which is always really handy. Then on the back, I've got an inside zip pocket. You can see that, which has got lots of space. Close that up. There's also a center divider pocket. Okay, so it's closed in at the bottom, so the bag is into sections. So you've got one section here, another section here, and then this center divider pocket is really big. Let's have a look. There you go. Lots and lots of space in there to store all sorts of things. There's also the added feature of adding a facing to the top, which I've done. Mine has got a magnetic snap, but there is the option to do a recessed zipper, and that's within the weekend add-on pack. I've added some two-tone straps because who doesn't love two-tone straps? And this really is a fantastically simple and easy to put together bag. Anytime during this video you're enjoying it, please give it a like and don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on any future videos. Throughout the video, while I was filming, we did have all sorts of crazy weather going on. We had gale force winds, torrential rain, hailstorms, thunder, lightning, brilliant sunshine, you name it, we had every weather system possible. I've tried to limit it as much as possible, but you might get the odd little bit of howling wind here and there. It just adds to the fun. Right, let's sew this bag. So I'm doing option B for the Tuesday Tote. So I've got two outer panels for one side and two outer panels for the other side. You'll see that these are mirrored. And then for the center, I've got two center pieces, and these are all cork fabric. Because I'm doing the weekend add-on, I'm also going to add two center pockets to the outside. So if we bring this back, I've got one for the front and one for the back. I will show you how I do this. The original pocket for the front is done slightly differently, so I have deviated from the pattern because I want to use cork and because I want to put a lining fabric on. So this is slightly different to the pattern instructions, but I'll take you through how to do it. And I've got these two pieces, which will be the lining for the outer pockets. I've got two lining fabrics, front and back, and these have been interfaced with a medium weight fusible interfacing. I've got two pieces of cork for the lining facing. Again, this is from the weekend add-on pack. And I'm doing the center divider, which is also from the add-on pack. So I've got two center divider pieces and two center divider linings. If, like me, you're going to do the center divider pocket, you will also need to do the zippered pocket. So I've got the zippered pocket lining and the zip overlay here. You need to do this if you're doing the center divider because you will need to have the zip available to be able to pull your bag through. That's all my pieces. I'm also going to do the keyring clip, so I'll show you that one now. Starting with the key holder clip, I found the midpoint and put some double-sided tape down the center. I'm going to fold in the sides into the center. I'm going to bring some grips or bobby pins across. And I'm going to take this across to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew down the first side across the bottom and back up the other side using a 3.5mm stitch length, and that's 1/8 of an inch or 3mm from the edge. There we go. So now, because I'm doing the 1-inch strap and because this isn't sealed down correctly, I'm now going to go around again just to make sure that those centre lines stay flat. So using the measurements in the pattern, I've marked 2 points using my chalk marker, and I'm going to use my rivet press to pop some rivets in. So first of all, I like to use this. I do have one of these on my rivet press, but I like to use this one. So make our 2 holes. Make sure we're folding it the correct way. So we want this open side to the back. Make sure it's the right way up, so I want it this way up. I'm going to fold this towards the back, lining up the holes that I've made, and pop my rivet through. The cap on the back, snap that into place. Bring across my rivet press. And there we are, rivet installed. Turning my lining piece over, I've made a mark on the front of my lining panel, and that measurement can be found in your pattern instructions. I've also made a mark on our keyring clip. I'm going to line up the edge of the keyring clip with the mark that I've made, and the line across here I'm going to line up with the top of the fabric, and I'm going to clip that in place. I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to baste this into place within the seam allowance to hold it there. There we are, that's stitched in place. So now we're going to add the lining facing. Taking our facing and lining fabric, we're going to find the midpoint. I'm going to make a small snip. Okay, just a tiny little snip out of there. Now, for the moment you only need to do this for the bottom, but I'm actually going to do the top and the bottom because it will save me time later. Okay. And I'm going to find the centre point of the top of my lining fabric. Now, I need to line up the bottom edge of my facing with the top of my lining. So for me, it's not a problem because mine, it doesn't matter which way up it is. If you've got a directional fabric, you need to make sure that your lining facing, this is the top, this is the bottom. So we're lining up the bottom edge with the top of here. This. And I'm going to flip that so as it's face down. And then clip that across the top. I'm now going to stitch across the top edge here with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, which is about 1 centimetre. And there we are, I've stitched across there, and I've back stitched really, really well at the beginning and end when I've crossed over the keyring clip, just to secure that a little bit more. I'm going to flip up the facing, and we're also going to flip up the keyring clip as well. Okay, so by doing that, you'll see that the seam allowance is now behind the lining fabric, okay, as well as the extra that's left over from the keyring clip. So make sure those are behind the lining fabric. Keep this up out of the way. And we're going to top stitch across the lining fabric, so not across the facing, across the lining fabric here with a 3.5mm stitch length, and that's 1/8 of an inch or 2 or 3 millimeters from the edge, which will keep all of this down behind the lining. I'm going to take a tiny little piece of double-sided tape, and just below the top stitching here, I'm going to place that tape. Make sure it's not longer than your keyring clip. We don't want it poking out the sides. And then I'm going to flip down my keyring clip and hold that in place. Now, using the measurements in the pattern instructions, I'm going to measure down a distance from the top edge of my keyring clip. There we are, I've made a mark centrally. I'm going to make a hole there and put my rivet through. So that's completed. Now I'm just going to do the same, stitching the facing onto the other lining fabric. So right sides together, the bottom of the facing with the top of the lining fabric, 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, flip up and top stitch. So let's do the zipper pocket. So I've got my zipper lining fabric and my zipper. I've attached the pull. You don't have to attach the zipper pull now. You can wait until later on, but I prefer to attach mine now because otherwise I have a tendency to forget to add it. So with my lining fabric right side up, now you can see that my fabric doesn't really matter which way up it goes. I'm going to put it this way up. This needs to be the top and this needs to be the bottom. We're going to line up our zipper tape with the top edge centrally and we're going to clip that in place. Now I've got it so as my zipper pull is over to the left when closed and to the right when open, but you can put yours whichever way around you like. Okay, so put that there and we'll clip that in place. I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine and I'm just going to baste that zipper tape onto the lining fabric. If you want, you can use a zipper foot to get past, but make sure you pull your zipper pull out of the way as you're sewing past. Right, I'm going to fold up the bottom edge, so keeping my zipper tape right side up and keeping the sides of my fabric even. Okay, so I don't want it like this, I want to make sure they're even. I'm going to lift up the zipper tape and join the fabric, so I've got the right side of the fabric to the wrong side of the zipper tape. Okay, let me show you that again. So flip the zipper tape up, fabric right sides together, but right side with wrong side with zipper tape, lined up with that free edge and lining up the edges of the lining fabric to make sure they're even, and then we'll clip that in place. Okay, and so what you've got is this, you've got sort of a zipper roll. Okay, so the zipper tape should be right side up and you should be able to see the wrong side of your fabric rolled all the way around. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine. This is the side we've already sewn. I'm going to baste along the other side the same as before. So taking our other lining fabric, the one without the keyring clip on, I've marked a box already for the zipper overlay. So you can mark your box using the instructions in the weekend add-on pack. I'm going to bring across my zipper overlay. I'm using some double-sided tape and put some on the back of here to hold it in place. Now I've put my zipper tape here to avoid the edges, the center edge here and the one here, because that's where I'm going to be stitching. Now my machine's quite happy to go through double-sided tape, but a lot of machines aren't. So try and get your double-sided tape in a place where you know that you're not going to be stitching. So let's take off the backing. Out of the way. Turn it over. And I'm going to line up facing there. Okay. Make sure it is even. I know I've drawn a box, but we'll just make sure. Now I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine and I'm going to stitch around the outer edge, not this edge here where the hole is, but right around the outer edge with a 3.5mm stitch length, 1/8 of an inch or 2 or 3 millimeters from that outer edge. Okay, I'm going to start with a craft knife because for me it's easier. And just slice through the fabric. Okay. To one side, and I can bring in my scissors. Makes it a little bit easier. Okay, get this out of the way. And now we're going to cut away this fabric from behind the zipper overlay. Now don't cut through, be careful not to cut through your zipper overlay. We're only cutting away the fabric from behind. Okay, so don't cut this, only this lining fabric. And we're cutting away from inside the stitches that we've already made. Okay, don't cut through your stitches. Taking some more double-sided tape, I'm just going to put some more on here just to help me keep the zipper tape in place. Okay. Doesn't need lots, just a little. Okay. I'm going to take off just the bottom double-sided tape, not the top one, leave that one where it is, just take off the bottom one. And then taking our pocket that we made earlier, lay that down with the zipper right side up. Remember, mine's going over to the left. We're going to lay our zipper panel down on top. Okay, so if you don't have your zipper pull on yet, that's okay. You can add that in a minute. Okay, pull that through if you have. Just going to flip this over and just check that this is central. So there should be an overhang on both sides. Okay, make sure that's nice and neat. I'm going to press down quickly there. So don't make the mistake that I made. You'll see I started sewing and then I realised that actually I had the pocket underneath, which meant as I was sewing I was sealing up the pocket. So once you have lined up your zipper tape correctly and you've taken off the cover for the double-sided tape and that's all nice and set, then keeping the zipper flat, you're actually going to hold up your zipper pocket out of the way. So your zipper pocket needs to be up towards the top so you don't do what I just did and sew it closed. Okay, so what we've got now is the zipper tape is behind the overlay. The pocket is up here out of the way. I'm not going to sew over it. It's absolutely fine. Okay. That's stuck down nicely. So now I'm going to top stitch across the bottom edge only. There we are. You see I've done that bottom edge and I've pulled the tails through to the back so I can knot those and leave it nice and neat. Okay, if you haven't put your zipper pull on yet, you can put your zipper pull on now. And you can see that's all nice and stitched. So now we can bring the pocket piece down behind our lining fabric. Make sure the zipper pull is pulled through. And we're going to stitch around the remaining 3 sides using a 3.5mm stitch length, keeping it 2 or 3 millimeters or 1/8 of an inch from the edge, joining up with the ends of our stitch line here. Make sure that you move your zipper pull out of the way as you're sewing. So now with your pocket facing up, we're going to flatten down the pocket and do a nice crease across the bottom. And then we're going to take a pair of scissors and we're going to cut through where that crease is. So now I've got my pocket completely open. I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine and I'm going to stitch down both sides, not the bottom, just both sides of the pocket using a 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to sew from the front. So I'm going to fold back the front lining and stitch down one side, and then I'm going to fold back the other side and stitch down this side. Okay, so stitch down both sides. Now I've drawn a line across the bottom of the pocket, a distance measured which is in the pattern instructions. Okay, so it's just drawn a line across here. I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut across that line as far as the stitches. I'm not going to cut into the stitches, I'm just going to cut up to them. Okay, as close as I can get. There we go. So I haven't cut through the stitches, just cut up to them now. I'm going to do the same on the other side. So just cutting up to them, not cutting through them, as close as I can get. Now I'm going to butterfly open the bottom seam allowance on both sides. Okay, so now we've got this sort of L-shaped indent on both sides. I'm going to fold up and back the bottom edge, okay, which will do that on both. Take this over to the iron and iron that in place. Okay, so make sure that your seam here is folded back and then under, and the same on the other side. Okay, so a little fiddly to do. It's not difficult, but you do need to manipulate it quite a bit. But the result is that when you come to close up your bag later on, it will be a nice, neat edge that you'll be able to sew because this is ironed down so neatly. Let's prepare the zipper tape for the center divider. So I've got my zipper pull onto my zipper tape already. I'm just going to check. This is the end that's closed and this is the end that will be open. Let's keep my zipper pull in the middle. So the end that will be closed, I'm going to measure down 1 inch from that end and make a mark. And do the same on both sides. I'm going to pull apart the zipper tape, and at that 1 inch line I'm going to pinch and fold it. Now as you pinch and fold, you'll see that the coil starts to turn, so we're going to go with that and bring our folded edge up to meet the edge of the zipper tape, and we'll pin that in place. Show you again on the other side. So there's our line. We're going to pinch, it's going to fold around to the side, bring up that folded edge to meet up with the bottom of the zipper teeth, and then we pin in place. Okay. And if we look from the back, we should have a really nice 45-degree angle on the back there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that to the sewing machine. I'm just going to baste close the very edge. So I'm not sewing near the zipper teeth over here. So right on the edge of the zipper tape here, so that will be in the seam allowance and won't be seen. I'm going to do that on both sides. So I've marked a line. This is my end that's been folded. I've marked a line on the other end to make the zipper tape the length that it states in the pattern instructions, and I'm just going to trim off that end. Now if you want, you can take your lighter now and burn the end of that just to stop it from fraying. We're going to take our zip tab I'm going to fold it in half along that long edge, and then I'm going to fold the two ends into the center and then fold it flat. I'm going to take that over to the iron and iron that down. There we are, so that's ironed nice and flat. Make sure that you line up these ends really well. It makes it much easier when it comes to sewing. So we're going to open this up and I'm going to place the zipper tape between those layers, lining up the end with the end of the zipper tape. I'll clip that, and then I'm going to take it across to the sewing machine. I'm just going to stitch across the bottom edge here with a 3mm stitch length, probably a little bit less than 1/8 of an inch from the edge. So really slowly, be careful going over your zipper tape and make sure that you're catching the back of your zipper tab as well as the front while you're sewing. There we are, that's all sewn. So I'm just going to trim down the edges. Okay, when you're doing that, be careful not to cut your stitches. So put this across to one side for a second. And now we're bringing in the center divider. Okay, so I've got my two center divider outers and my two center divider linings. Now you need to make sure that you get these up the right way. So let's move that out so you can see. This is the top and this is the bottom with the two cutouts. That's for the outer. And for the lining, you'll see the top is wider than the bottom. Okay, so make sure you get those up the right way. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the center midpoint of all of these pieces and my zipper tape. Okay, so put these over to one side for the moment. I'm going to take one of my center divider pieces and my zip. So I've got my center divider right side up. Let's move those over. I've got my center divider right side up. This is the top, remember this is the bottom, and here is my zipper tape, and I'm going to place that right side down, lining up these center points, and we'll clip those in place. I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine and I'm just going to baste the zipper tape onto this lining. So I've basted on my zip. Now I'm bringing back one of my lining, my center divider lining pieces, turned it over, and I've marked an L shape on the top corners of each side. Okay. Now I'm going to line up the center point of my lining with the center point from before. I'm going to move my zipper pull out of the way so it doesn't make it bumpy. Line that up and clip all the way along. I'm going to turn this over. And on this center divider, we'll call it the outer piece, I'm going to measure down 1/2 inch from each side and make a mark. Okay, so using my stitching from before as a guide, as my starting and stopping points, I'm going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance this time to attach the lining piece, making sure that I move my zipper pull out of the way as I'm sewing. So keep an eye on where that is, making sure not to sew over the zipper teeth. So on the lining side where we made our L shapes, I'm just adding some double-sided tape. Okay, done one side. Let's do the other. Super sticky. 2. And I'm going to fold down this corner to meet the other corner there. Okay, so I'm just folding down the lining, not the main center divider. Same on this side, let's fold it down to meet that L shape. Okay. I'm going to turn over and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So this time I'm going to put some tape across the top edge here, and with these ones I'm just going to fold down, folding that down out of the way. Okay, so I'm going to flip this over, pull my zipper tape, make sure that this is as flat as can be. And the outside we're going to top stitch across the front to hold these pieces in place. And there we are, that's top stitch right the way along from one edge right the way across to the other. So now we're going to repeat all of those steps with the other side. Okay, so including the marking the L shapes, marking the 1/2 inch down, repeat all of those steps for this side. So now taking the 2 outers, we're going to put those right sides together and flip so as we've got the linings right side together and the outers right side together. I'm going to clip across the bottom of the lining. And on the outer, I'm going to clip them together. Now, we're going to sew along the bottom edge of the lining, only the bottom edge. And on the outer, we're just going to sew across the corners on a diagonal. We're going to do a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, that's 1 centimetre. So if you want, you can measure in your 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimetre and draw a line across on the diagonals here. It will make it a little bit easier when you're sewing. Sometimes it can be difficult sewing on a diagonal. There we are, so let's stitch those 2 corners and the bottom edge. Now we're going to trim down these seam allowances to 1/4 of an inch or 5 or 6 millimeters. Okay, and now we're going to turn through. I'm going to clip down these 2 sides and across the bottom. And then I'm going to clip down the bottom as well. Now the lining for the bottom is shorter, so we're not clipping the lining into this. It's just the outer. I'm going to baste down the 2 sides and across the bottom using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. That's 2 3 millimeters and a 3.5 millimeter stitch length. I don't need to worry about doing the corners because we've already stitched those from the inside. So it's down the sides and the bottom. So that's the center divider pocket finished. Open it up, check it works, and that should be completely sealed inside. Let's install the magnetic snap for the bag. So I've got my 2 prepared lining fabrics and I've got my magnetic snap. So we'll start with this one. Now, I've already found the midpoint because we did that earlier. So now I'm going to measure down the distance here and make a mark. So I've made a mark and using my magnetic snap as a guide, I'm going to mark 2 lines. I'm going to take my craft knife and I'm going to slice through. I'm going to take one side of my magnetic snap, push it through there. I'm going to take a square leftover piece of Deckerville heavy, Deckerville on top to help stabilize a bit, get a bit more support. Put my washer on top. And I prefer to pull the tabs out towards the side. You can push them into the center if you prefer, but I find that that leaves a bit of a bobbly mark. So I like to push them out to the side, and then my Decaville protects whatever's on the other side. If you want, you can also put another piece of stabilizer or something over the top, or some masking tape to protect this side. It's entirely up to you. So now we've done that one, we can do exactly the same thing on the other lining fabric. Taking one of my lining fabrics, I'm going to do the one with the zipper pocket. I'm going to measure up a distance from the edge of the corner cutouts, and I'm going to do that on both sides. That measurement you can find in the pattern instructions. My fabric's a little bit busy, but I hope you can see those 2 marks. We're also going to find the center of this bottom edge. So if you haven't done it already, I haven't done it on here. We're going to take our center divider pocket. Now I'm going to have my pull over to the left, so as it's the same as the other one. If you want, you could do them so they were opposite. It really doesn't matter. So I'm going to line up the center point of my center divider with the center point that we just made on the bottom edge, and clip that in place. Now I'm going to baste across this bottom edge with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, now I'm going to take the other lining piece. This is our one with the keyring clip on it, and I'm going to put that right side down, lining up the midpoints, and hopefully our magnetic snap should work, which it does. Lining up, and I'm going to clip across this bottom edge. So now I'm going to stitch across this bottom edge with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. 1/2 inch is about 1.5 centimeters. There we are. So that's stitched in place. Make sure we've caught it well on both sides. Now we're going to butterfly open this seam allowance as best we can. Hold that open flat. And then we're going to top stitch across both sides. So I'm going to start with this side, keeping my center divider out of the way. I'm going to top stitch down this side, and then keeping my divider out the other way, I'm going to top stitch down the other side. Let's sew this lining together. So we've got our center divider, and we have our marks that we made on the corners of one side earlier. So we're going to take the corner edge on the center divider, this corner edge here, and we're going to line that up with the mark at the side. Okay, so we're going to end up with this piece behind here. So line up that corner with that mark, and then we line up the sides of the center divider and the lining panel, and we'll clip that in place. Okay, I'm going to take that to the sewing machine, and I'm just going to baste down that one side, being really careful to keep the lining flat behind it, and I'm going to move my zipper pull out of the way just in case. There we are, so that's basted on, so now I don't have to worry about that side, and we're going to turn it around. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So here's my mark and here's my corner, so I'm going to line up the corner with that mark, clip in place, and then line up the sides and clip along. Now, before I baste this side on, I'm going to take a ruler and I'm just going to check that the distance from my seam here to here is the same. If it isn't, then I know I need to make some adjustments. And I need to do that now before I finish sewing this on. I'm happy with that, so I'm going to go ahead and baste along that side. So there we are, that's one side joined. And now we're going to join up this side. So this is going to get a little bit tricky. Just take your time and we'll get through it. So get some clips. Now, we're going to take this side, because we've done the facing, we're going to line up the seam allowances from the facing. Okay, so we'll do that first, because this is what you will see. So we'll line those up. It's a little bit tricky because I've got black on the end of this one, and that's okay. Line that up first and clip that in place. I'll put one clip above and one clip below. Then I know that's not going to move. And then I'm going to continue clipping all the way down. Okay, now you can clip the other side down if you'd like. I'm actually going to do one side and then do the other side. So to make our lining sit nicely inside the bag, we're going to do a 1/2 inch seam allowance at the bottom, tapering down to a 3/8 of an inch at the top. There we are. And while I was sewing, I was making sure to keep this as flat as possible, folded out of the way on both sides. Okay, so obviously we don't want to accidentally stitch over this piece like this. Make sure everything is flat on both sides. Now I'm going to repeat exactly the same thing on the other side. There we are. So that's all sewn up. That looks good. Quite happy with that. Remember when you're sewing to make sure that your zipper pull is out of the way. I kept mine in the middle. So let's just close up these corners. So starting with the first corner, it doesn't matter which one you start with. Starting with the first corner, pull at the gap, butterfly open your seam allowances so they stay nice and flat. Turn it around so you can see. I'm going to line up those corners and get a nice straight edge, and then we'll clip that in place. Okay, I'll do the same thing on the other corner. I'm going to take this across to the sewing machine and I'm going to stitch across from one side to the other using a 1/2 inch seam allowance and a 2.5mm stitch length. And there we are. So I'm just going to take my scissors and I'm going to trim that down to about 1/4 inch. That's 5 or 6mm. There we are. And that's our lining complete. Just check quickly that you haven't got any holes anywhere, you haven't missed anything. Make sure there's nothing strange going on. There we are. And we can put that over to one side. We're going to start sewing the outer slip pocket. Now, as I said at the beginning, I'm sewing this slightly different to the pattern instructions. So my pieces are slightly different. All I've done is I've taken the center piece for option B and I've cut 6 inches off of the top. Okay, so take your pattern piece for the center, just cut 6 inches off the top of that and you'll be left with what I've got here. So I'm doing slip pockets on both sides because I like pockets. So we're going to do exactly the same on both sides. I'm going to put one of these to one side for the moment. And we're just going to work with this one. So this is my outer and this is my lining, and I'm going to put them right sides together. Now my fabric, it's not really directional, but I'm going to make sure that this one, this chameleon here, this lizard, is going to be right side up rather than this one. So I want this to be the top. So I'm going to put these right sides together. I'm going to clip them in place across the top and the bottom. Now I'm going to take this across to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew them with a 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, top and bottom. There we are. So I'm just going to trim this down a little. And I'm going to turn that through. If you're using a quilting cotton, obviously you can iron this into place, but because I'm using cork, I can't. So let's look at that. So again, this is the top for me. So making sure that my top is rolled really, really well. I'm going to clip that in place. I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine and I'm going to top stitch across the top edge of the top only. Okay, so I'm not top stitching the bottom, I'm only doing the top. And I'm actually going to do 2 rows of stitching. The first row, 1/8 of an inch or 2 or 3 millimeters from the edge, and then again about 1/4 inch from the edge, just for decorative purposes. Okay, and I'm only doing that on the top, not the bottom. And there we are. So that's top stitched across the top, and obviously the bottom has been left. So now I'm going to do exactly the same thing with the other one. So taking one of my center panels and one of my pocket pieces, I'm going to measure down 5 inches from the top of my center panel. I'm going to make a mark on both sides. Okay, so I've made my 2 marks for 5 inches, and then I'm going to take my pocket panel. I'm going to line up the top edge of my pocket panel with the 2 marks that I've made, and I'm going to clip that in place. And then I'm going to take it across to the sewing machine. I'm going to stitch down one, just baste down one side to hold it in place. Then I'm going to top stitch across the bottom. Be really careful because your top stitching will be seen. And then I'm going to baste back up the other side. So obviously your 2 side panels, your stitching won't be seen, but the bottom it will be. And then when I've done that, I'm going to come back to the bottom, and the same as I did with the top, I'm going to stitch another line 1/4 of an inch from the edge, just to make it a little bit more decorative and give it a little bit more security. So there we go, that's stitched on there. I've done 2 rows of stitching at the bottom. Now you can see that my cork has shifted a little. My cork is incredibly spongy. I'm not too worried about this little bit. That'll get lost in the seam allowance. It'll be perfectly fine. I've double stitched here just to make sure that will be okay. So now we just have to do exactly the same thing with the other one. So taking our center panel and one of each of the outers, make sure they are mirrored. We're going to lay one on top of the center panel, and we're going to clip that in place. When we've done that, I'm going to stitch across that side with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and I'm going to back stitch really well where I can feel that pocket panel is, just to give it some extra security. When I've stitched on this side, I'm going to do exactly the same thing with the other side. I'm going to fold it right sides together and stitch down with a 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimetre seam allowance. Back stitching really well, beginning and end, and where I can feel the edges of that pocket panel are. There we are. So you can see I've double stitched the seams. The reason I've done that is because I'm using cork and it's quite a heavy fabric, and if you double stitch the seams it can help to stop the thread from showing when you open it out. Okay, so let's open that. That's looking quite good. Now you'll see my cork has shifted a little. That's been caused by the bulk from this pocket. It doesn't matter. We'll trim up any little extra pieces so it makes it easier when we come to sew together. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to flatten this out so as the seam allowance is behind the outer. Okay, that nice and flat. And then I'm going to top stitch down that edge, being careful going over this area here because this is becoming quite bulky now, all the way down to the bottom, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And then when I've done all of that, I'm going to put together the other panel. And there we go, that's both of the outer panels finished, top stitched. Let's get the straps added. Okay, so for the straps, I am deviating from the pattern again, just a little. So I have some of this cork strap that's pre-made, which I really love using because it means that I don't have to mess around folding straps in. This is a 1-inch strap. So I've cut myself 2 strips of my dark brown cork at a 3/4 inch. Okay, so I can do that as an inlay. I've pre-treated the cork, so I've burnt the edges with a lighter, and then I've gone along with a little bit of fabric glue just to make sure that they don't fray. So that's already been done. So let's take these 2, put them over to one side, and we'll start with this one. So I'm just going to get my double-sided tape and stick that in place. I'm covering up the seam where the 2 fold together. Okay. Now I'm going to top stitch down both sides with a 3.5mm stitch length, 1/8 of an inch, or as close to the edge to the dark brown cork as I can possibly get. So down the side or around all 4 sides. There we are, there's our 2 straps finished. So now we need to add them to the outer panels. So I actually forgot to add my logo onto the front of one of my panels. So I'm going to do that to start with. So I'm going to find the center point. I'm going to actually put it here. Ideally, I probably would have put it on the pocket. If you want to do that, then you need to add your label to your pocket before you sew the lining together. So I'll do that while I'm over at the sewing machine. Let's put that to one side for now. Now here is our strap. Now the strap needs to be placed either side of this center panel, and we need to leave a 1/2 inch overhang, which is what I've got here on the ends of my straps. So as I said before, to keep the bulk down, you need to check which way you want your strap to go. So obviously if I put mine this way, when I flip up, you're actually going to see the other side of it, and I want to do the opposite of that. So I'm actually going to put it this way. And you need to make sure that you haven't got it twisted. So let's just do this. Let's just double check. So when I bring this up, there we are. My handle will be the double-sided that I want it to be. Okay, so I'm going to clip these in place and I'm going to baste that on. Okay, and then when I've done that, I'm going to do exactly the same with the other panel. That's the 2 outers finished. So now let's piece these together. Okay, so we're going to put these panels right sides together. The straps are going to be a little bit bulky, don't worry about that. You can, if you want, pull those out of the way for the moment. We're not working with the top, we're only working with the bottom. So we're going to line up the bottom edges, making sure that our seams are aligned, because these will be seen and the corner edges here won't be. So make sure that your seams are lined up and that the bottom edge is lined up too. And clip that in place. And we're going to stitch across that bottom edge with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, that's 1 centimetre. And I'm going to double stitch that seam the same way that I did with the ones here to prevent any pulling. There we are, so I've double stitched that. Now I'm going to open out the seam, and from the back, this is a little bit difficult because it's cork. If you're using something like quilting cotton, it's much easier. I'm going to butterfly open this seam, keeping this open at the back. I'm going to top stitch down this side all the way to the end, pivot, turn around and come back down the other side, making sure that this stays open at the back. There we go, so that's all top stitched down the bottom, nice and flat on the inside. So now we're going to put these right sides together, lining up the side seams. We're going to clip those in place, both sides, and then I'm going to do a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. That's about 1 centimetre from the edge, sewing those side seams up, and I'm going to double stitch like I did before with the centre and the base. Okay, as the side seams are sewn together, let's close up the bottom. So you can start whichever corner you want, pull out as far as possible. We're going to line up these centre seams exactly the same as we did with the lining, butterfly that open and clip in place. There we are, that's both corners clipped. I'm going to stitch across the bottom with a 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimetre seam allowance, and I'm going to double stitch the seam as I've done with all the others, just for a bit of extra security. Right, those are done. Let's assemble this bag. So I've got my outer right side in, and my lining right side out. So these are going to be right sides together. If you have a preference as to which is the front or the back, you need to check now. So obviously this is the front of my bag because it has my label on it. And I want my zipper pocket to be the back of my bag. So before I put this in, make sure that your zipper pocket is open because we're going to need to pull the bag through. Don't forget that. I'm going to put the outer inside. There we go. And I'm going to join everything up. So I'm going to start at the seams first. Butterfly those seams open, and then I'm going to clip, come around to the other side and clip that, join up the centres, and then clip all the way around the top. There we are, all clipped around the top. Lots and lots of clips. Take your time sewing, and we're going to do a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. That's 1 centimetre. There, that's all sewn. I've double stitched the seam to make it more secure. Now, before I turn this through, I'm going to cut down these extra pieces just from the seam allowances here. Okay, just to make it a little bit easier when we top stitch. And that takes it away from the top, means we've got less layers. I'm going to do that on this side, I'm going to do it on the other side. There we are. So now when I'm top stitching, I won't have so many layers to go through. Let's turn this bag through. Move my scissors out of the way. Now, we should have left our zipper open for the pocket. We also need to make sure we've got the zip open for the main bag if you have one. Okay, so I'm going to reach in. We've got to pull everything through here. So let's see, start by pulling this out. I'm going to reach in inside the bag and find the bottom of the outer. I'm going to pull that through first. Okay, and just push through the bottom corners. Right, so I've pushed everything down inside, made sure everything's lying flat, and then with the top here, as we did before, we're going to roll this seam as best we can and clip that in place. I'm just going to go round the top, rolling the seam and clipping all the way around. There we are, all clipped. So starting, this is the back, I'm starting at the back. I'm going to top stitch around the top using a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, that's 2 or 3 millimeters, and a 3.5 millimeter stitch length. And take it really, really slow, especially around these areas that are quite bulky, and I'll probably use a hump jumper to get over those. That's all top stitched nicely. I had to use my hump jumper here, it gets quite thick here and obviously quite thick at the corners. Of the seams where they join. So that just leaves us to sew up this pocket. So because of our preparation earlier, this now becomes really, really easy. We're just going to pull together, clip that in place, make sure it's lined up nicely, and just sew across the bottom edge there, closing up the pocket. There we go, so it's closed up at the bottom, push that inside. Zip up. There we are. All finished.